Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be counting down the top 10 films from the 2000s that you must own on 4K Blu-ray. And just like the other lists I did here on the channels from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, this is my own personal list where I kind of combine my own like smorgasbord. I put everything into a blender, and this is what came out. So it's combining the quality of the film, the quality of the 4K Blu-ray, and how I feel about the film overall. So it's really just my opinion, but I want to hear from you guys. What is your opinion? What are the top 10 films from the 2000s that you must own on 4K Blu-ray? Let me know in the comment section, and if there's anything that I left off this list that you just feel like is absolutely unbelievable and I was wrong about it, let me know that in the comment section below as well. But without me ranting too much, let's get right into this list and start it off with number 10.
Welcome back, brother.
And at number 10, I got Mission Impossible 3 from 2006. Now, this isn't one of my favorite Mission Impossible films, and I also don't think it's one of the best looking. In fact, I think this is the worst looking from a cinematography standpoint of any of the Mission Impossible films. I just don't think that J.J. Abrams nailed that, but it is a huge upgrade from the Blu-ray to this 4K Blu-ray. This 4K Blu-ray makes the movie actually look pretty damn decent. There are certain elements, like I could just picture that neon green in my head that, you know, really stands out in this movie that was so flat and bland on the previously released Blu-ray. So the 4K Blu-ray really is doing its job. Even though I still think this is one of the worst in the franchise, you get such a great Philip Seymour Hoffman. That just should tell you the quality of the Mission Impossible franchise, where I think Mission Impossible 3 is one of the worst, where it's still a phenomenal film. It's a great, entertaining as hell movie. I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman gives one of the best performances. I think he might actually be the best villain overall in the entire franchise. Philip Seymour Hoffman is one of the greatest actors we ever had. We lost him at such a young age, and the movie itself is still really good. This is the first time we see Simon Pegg, who would be a huge part once we get to, you know, where I think the franchise, you know, it's not really a reboot, but where it gets taken to the next level with Ghost Protocol. But still, if you were around in 2006, Mission Impossible 3 was a great time in the theaters, and I think it was a huge jump forward, and especially after Mission Impossible 2, which at the time I really didn't love, but I've learned to appreciate it. Mission Impossible 2 did not make this list. There was only 2 movies that came out in the 2000s, the Mission Impossible franchise, and I chose to go at Mission Impossible 3.
Just cleaned up this mess. Can we keep it clean for 10 minutes?
I'm at the top of my game.
And at number 9, Brad Bird was connected to the Mission Impossible franchise. He actually directed Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, but before that, in 2004, he directed The Incredibles. Now, this is a Disney 4K Blu-ray, so it's not the greatest 4K Blu-ray, but the film itself is fantastic. This is one of the greatest superhero films of all time, one of Pixar's best. It's so heartwarming. It's one you could sit down and watch with the entire family. You'll have so many laughs. Samuel L. Jackson is great in this movie as well, and it's just entertaining as all hell. Yes, the animation might not hold up as well as, you know, modern day Pixar films, but in 2004, this looks great, and I mean, it really is one of Pixar's best films. The Incredibles 2 is awesome. I love The Incredibles 2. I have that on 4K Steelbook as well. This is probably one of Pixar's most famous movies ever, and when you go back and rewatch this, you know why. It's just that damn good. So I can definitely recommend this 4K. I wish that the Criterion Collection would like kind of give this the same treatment that they gave WALL-E. I was hoping, you remember when WALL-E came to 4K Blu-ray, we were all fantasizing what's going to be the next Disney 4K Blu-ray that Criterion puts out. Turns out none. So that's a little bit disappointing. I would love them to dip their toes into The Incredibles, though.
That's what I'm talking about.
And at number 8, I'm going to pick an Edgar Wright film. I'm going to pick one right in the middle of the Cornetto trilogy, and that is Hot Fuzz. I still think this is Edgar Wright's best movie. A lot of people might say Baby Driver now. I love Baby Driver, but Hot Fuzz is fantastic. You know, this one is really a satire of 1980s and 1990s and early 2000s action films. Really, the 2 big ones are Point Break, which I absolutely love, and Bad Boys 2, which, you know what, we're actually going to be talking about the Bad Boys films this week, so don't want to get too far ahead of myself with that, but Hot Fuzz is great. Nick Frost, Simon Pegg, they have great chemistry together. The Cornetto trilogy, it's just, you know, 3 different stories. They have no connection to each other other than that ice cream. And in this movie, it's just so entertaining. It's paced so well. It's so funny. You also get Timothy Dalton in there in a small role.
I'm sorry? I'm a slasher, and I must be stopped. You're a what? A slasher of prices.
And as a fan of Timothy Dalton in the 1980s James Bond movies, I love seeing him in this movie. Plus, he's actually just really funny. Didn't really get that from him in anything else I'd seen, but he was really in on the joke. And it's just one of those movies from the 2000s you absolutely have to check out. And if you want to check it out in the best format possible, this is a pretty damn good 4K Blu-ray.
Where are you going?
just leaving.
But where?
I have to return some videotapes.
And at number 7, I got American Psycho. And this movie came out in the year 2000. I think this is still Christian Bale's best performance. He is so good in this movie. He's just chewing scenery. Loves Huey Lewis in the News. Loves Phil Collins. Who doesn't? You know, Willem Dafoe's in this movie. He gives a great performance as well. Jared Leto, he's in a small part. He gets an axe to the face in this movie. Probably deserved it. He doesn't even pay attention. He should have realized what was going to happen to him. But, you know, it's an 80s yuppie, so he's just in his own little world. He doesn't give a shit about anybody else. And this movie is just so good. The entire third act is great. The attention to 1980s detail in this movie when it came out in the year 2000. I love all of that. You know, I always get a little worried when we get movies that come out that take place in, you know, recent decades that they're not going to pay attention to those little details, but they really did in this movie. And of course, you get quotable lines like, I need to return some videotapes. Now, the 4K Blu-ray itself, it's pretty good. I actually need to do a review for this here on the channel, see how well it holds up. This just had a Lionsgate Steelbook re-release with the same 4K disc in there. Looked really nice, but I couldn't justify double dipping for it. So I just have the regular old-fashioned slipcover edition.
Sign up for this!
And then at number 6, we have to pick one Nolan movie from the 2000s. He had his fingers all over that, starting in the early 2000s with Memento, and then he had Insomnia, and then he got his big break with Batman Begins, which I think is the better of the films, but I'm still going to pick The Dark Knight because of its historical significance. I really do love The Dark Knight. I don't love it as much as I used to. I saw that movie 9 times in theaters, got my 10th time when I went and saw it in 2018 for its 10th anniversary, and what The Dark Knight did for superhero films, I mean, Heath Ledger won an Academy Award for playing the Joker, really opening the door up for guys like Joaquin Phoenix to win the Academy Award, really starting to show the superhero movies deserve more love. And this was really it ascending. It probably reached its mountaintop this year with The Dark Knight and Iron Man coming out in the very same year, the beginning of the MCU. And The Dark Knight, you know, the Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy of movies really are probably the best superhero films we ever got as far as a trilogy goes. You know, they feel a little bit bigger than every other superhero movie. They feel a little bit cleaner. They are so well made, so well directed, and The Dark Knight, despite me not caring as much for this movie as I used to care about it, I find that the third act has some flaws in it. The whole fairy sequence is just, you know, I feel like we're kind of beating a message over its head at that point, and I don't think it works for me at this point. And that's just because, you know what, when you see a movie as many times as I have, sometimes you just start to poke holes in it, and you start to notice its flaws a little bit more. I feel like that does happen a little bit more with Christopher Nolan's movies, but still, that the reason why The Dark Knight is at number 6 is because of how important it is. The 4K Blu-ray, maybe not as good as, like, you know, other 4K Blu-rays out there. There's definitely room for improvement, but it's definitely a must own.
Everybody likes me. It's a reason to smile.
And at number 5, we have Requiem for a Dream. Now, this one is a very tough rewatchable. Not a lot of people like to run back to this movie, and I completely understand why. It is one of the darkest films when it comes to illustrating drug use, and I mean, we see it from every angle. We see it from Ellen Burstyn, who gives probably her best performance since The Exorcist in this movie, and honestly, her entire arc is the saddest. That's the hardest thing for me to watch, is watching a mother who loves her son, and then she just ends up falling into addiction herself. Her son, Jared Leto, the scene towards the end, you know, with his arm, I'm not going to spoil it, man, that is brutal. You also get Marlon Wayans in this movie. He doesn't really give too many dramatic performances, but he was great, and you just feel, this movie, when you watch it, when it's over, you want to take a shower. You know, it's an entire anxiety attack. It's sad, but it is so well directed by Darren Aronofsky, so well edited, and the 4K Blu-ray is pretty damn good. So if you want to rewatch it or watch this movie for the first time, I definitely can recommend this 4K Blu-ray.
Steal from Terry Benedict. You're gonna need a crew as nuts as you are.
And then at number 4, I'm only going to pick one from this trilogy of movies, and that is Ocean's 11. This movie from 2001, I think this is one of the greatest heist movies of all time, directed by Steven Soderbergh, and the cast stacked from top to bottom. I just did a review of this entire trilogy here on the channel if you want to get my full thoughts, but I do think that Ocean's 11 is head and shoulders better than 12 and 13, and I like Ocean's 12 and 13, but I'll rewatch Ocean's 11 every single year. 12 and 13, you know, every few years I'll pop them in, but they just do not stick the landing as well as Ocean's 11 does, and thankfully, these 4K Blu-rays from Warner Brothers are great. They really did a good job. I would have liked a little bit better audio per se, but still, the audio is great. The visuals are stunning. It's a huge jump from the previous releases. This is the best that it's ever looked. And if you know, for some reason you haven't given Ocean's 11 a shot, this is definitely the best way to do it. And you could buy Ocean's 11 on its own in just a steelbook if you don't want to have Ocean's 12 and 13, which I understand, but I do still think that they're worth a watch. You bring back most of the main characters in those movies, and I mean, like I was saying, this cast is top to bottom. George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Don Shields, Bernie Mac, Casey Affleck, Julia Roberts. I could go on and on. And that brings us to number 3, and I got 2000's Donnie Darko, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. And this movie, I have always loved this movie, even the theatrical cut, but I do think this is one of those movies where the director's cut is much better, fleshes out the story a little bit more, helps it to make a lot more sense, because it can be very confusing when you watch this movie for the first time, and I feel like a lot of people wouldn't go back to it. The reason why I always kept going back to it is I love how the movie looked, I love the acting, I love the performance, I love the music in this movie. You also get Patrick Swayze playing an absolute piece of shit in this movie, which is very rare for him. Usually, you know, that's not the way he goes. Even when he plays a bad guy, people still care about him. He's garbage in this movie. You also get Drew Barrymore in there, but Jake Gyllenhaal, he gives a standout performance in this movie. I really remembered him at this age for Bubble Boy, but he should have always been remembered for Donnie Darko. And then this Arrow 4K Blu-ray, I mean, it makes this movie look phenomenal. It's still a pretty dark-looking movie in general, even on 4K Blu-ray, but this is the best way to view it. And of course, if you can get in this Arrow Collector's Edition with the poster, with the reading material, with the Arrow hard case, then you'll be eating good in the neighborhood. But if you've never seen this movie before, I definitely recommend checking out the director's cut, because you'll probably be confused watching the theatrical cut.
What's the difference? This is not the regular police!
And then at number 2, and you know, the reason why this list took a long time to get out after I did the 70s, 80s, and 90s is because I was waiting for movies like this, Mean Girls, the Ocean Trilogy. They're all coming out pretty soon. The 2000s doesn't have the greatest amount of 4K Blu-rays as comparison to other decades. And you know, a lot of that I think is because a lot of those movies from the 2000s, they just don't look that great. But a movie that looks phenomenal, directed by one of the greatest directors of all time in Martin Scorsese, and this is finally him getting his flowers, winning Best Director at the Academy Awards. This movie also won Best Picture. You get great performances from Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon giving his best performance, Jack Nicholson chewing up scenery and just looking like he's having a blast, and I'm all there for it. You also get Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, and Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg is great in this movie as well. Him and Alec Baldwin's banter is great. Vera Farmiga and Leonardo DiCaprio have one of the best sex scenes in film history in this movie. It's actually my favorite. You know, I'm just always glad when we get some Pink Floyd playing over that. And the movie in general, it's great. It's not my favorite Martin Scorsese movie, but I just rewatched it because of this 4K Blu-ray, and it still holds up so well. But the 4K Blu-ray is great. It's a huge upgrade over the previously released Blu-ray. And, you know, at this point, this is the definitive edition of The Departed.
To the shadow.
And then at number 1, some people might consider this cheating, but I feel like if you're going to watch The Lord of the Rings, you have to watch the entire trilogy, and if you have the extended cuts available to you, those are the cuts you're supposed to watch, and if you watch all 3 of those movies, you're creeping in on about 12 hours of film right there, and it's never boring. It took me a week to watch the extended cuts because I just don't have that much time, and I'm so glad I did. I just really want to run back and rewatch these right now. They kind of feel like late spring, early summer movies, so I'm really in the mood to watch these films again, and they're just so well made. But these 4K Blu-rays, they're reference quality when it comes to visuals and audio. So if you are a fan of collecting physical media and you're a fan of The Lord of the Rings and you don't have these, you're really missing out. But if you've never seen the Lord of the Rings movies, then you have to check them out any which way you can, because they are just, you know, I wasn't the biggest Lord of the Rings fan. I was there when they came out. You know, I had friends who just love these movies, and I just couldn't really get into it. I don't know why, but then when I rewatched these last years, I don't know. I was missing something, because these movies are incredibly well made. Peter Jackson does a great job of combining practical effects with CGI effects, shooting on location in New Zealand. I mean, it all looks great. Stacked cast up and down, giving great performances in a world of bad looking and bad acting CGI blockbusters. If you go back and watch the Lord of the Rings movie, there's a reason why Return of the King won the Academy Award for Best Picture. It's because they were rewarding the entire trilogy of movies. And again, if you're going to watch them, you got to watch them on these 4K Blu-rays. You get the extended and the theatrical cuts. I recommend the extended cuts. The only thing that really kind of sucks about this is if you're an extras junkie like me, you got no extras, and that is very disappointing. But still, the Lord of the Rings trilogy are phenomenal on 4K Blu-ray, and these are the way to go, and these are definitely the must-own for the 2000s. But just remember, guys, this list is entirely my opinion. I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below, and then while you're down there, Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video, turn notifications on. You know the whole deal. But we also have a friends of the channel tier if you want to become a channel member. We have a producers tier where you're going to find John Doe Juggalo, Jason Martin, and Mr. Smelly Potato. And we also have a directors tier where you're going to find Frank from Frank's Media and Review. So if you want to join one of those channel memberships, look for all the perks in the description below. But if you got no money to throw away, guys, don't worry about it. We just appreciate you guys checking out this video. All we hope is that you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, tell your friends, and then we'll be seeing you around.